How can our second language learners be distinguished from one another? Are there particular features of their personality or mind that encourage or inhibit their second language learning? Why can some of them learn another language while others cannot? Or some of them will prosper, some won't, often despite their best intentions and whatever the teaching method is used. In this video, we will uncover some of the differences between individuals that have been linked to how well they learn a second language in a classroom. Good day, I'm Ortiz, and this is Individual Differences in Second Language Users and Second Language Learners. We shall look at motivation for second language learning, attitudes, aptitude, age, and the other personality traits such as cognitive style, personality differences, and other individual variations that are deemed important to second language learning. Undoubtedly, one reason for some students doing better than others is that they are better motivated. The child learning a first language does not have good or bad motivation in any meaningful sense. Every teacher knows that some students will learn a second language effortlessly, others will struggle forever. Some of the explanation for this lies undoubtedly in the different situations they encounter. Children learn their first language naturally in the intimate situations of their family. School learners learn a second language formally in the public situation of the classroom. For teachers, motivation is probably the interest that something generates in the students. It could be a particular exercise, a particular topic, a particular song that may interest the students in the class. Now, what motivates people to learn languages? Based on a survey in 6 schools in the European Union, learning English was an advantage for communication and work abroad, facilitation of computer work, comprehension of music text, among others, which can include understand people from other cultures for personal satisfaction. Motivation in second language learning has, however, mostly been used to refer to long-term stable attitudes in the students' minds, in particular, integrative and instrumental reasons for studying modern languages. When students learn the language for an ulterior motive unrelated to its use by native speaker, for example, they'd like to pass an examination to get a certain kind of job, they are instrumentally motivated. On the other hand, some people want to learn a second language with an integrative motivation. That is, when they would like to live in a country where it's spoken, to participate more freely in the activities of other cultural groups. The integrative motivation reflects whether the student identifies with a target culture and people in some sense, or rejects them. The more that student admires the target culture, the more successful he or she will be in the second language classroom. Besides instrumental and integrated motivation, Dornier introduced second language or L2 motivational self system, and the system suggests that our success in learning depends on how we want to achieve our ideal second language self. That all our efforts are concentrated on a particular goal, like winning an athletics race or passing an examination. And to do this, we must have a vision of how we want to be in the future. Learning a second language in a classroom will be difficult to students if they have neither instrumental nor integrative motivation, and if they feel negatively about bilingualism or are too attached to monolingualism. School children have no particular contact with a foreign culture and no particular interest in it, nor do their job prospects depend on it. Their attitudes to second language users may depend more on the stereotypes from their cultural situations than on any real contact. In an ideal teacher's world, students would enter the classrooms admiring the target culture and language, wanting to get something out of the second language learning for themselves, eager to experience the benefits of bilingualism and thirsting for knowledge. In practice, teachers have to be aware of the reservations and preconceptions of their students. what they think of the teacher, the course, and the second language users in general heavily affects their success. The process of creating successful learning, which can spur high motivation, may be under the teacher's control, if not the original motivation. The choice of teaching materials and the information content of the lesson, for example, should correspond to the motivations of the students. After looking into motivation for second language learning, we have learned that both integrative and instrumental motivations may lead to success, but lack of either causes problems. And short-term motivation towards the day-to-day activities in the classroom and general motivations for classroom learning play important roles. The roots of the motivations discussed in the last section are deep within the students' minds and their cultural backgrounds. One issue is how the student's own cultural background relates to the background projected by the second language culture. Lambert makes an important distinction between additive and subtractive bilingualism. In additive bilingualism, the learners feel they are adding something new to their skills and experience by learning a new language without taking anything away from what they already know. In subtractive bilingualism, on the other hand, they feel that the learning of a new language threatens what they have already gained for themselves. Successful second language learning takes place in additive situations. Learners who see the second language as diminishing themselves will not succeed. A useful model of attitudes that has been developed over many years is acculturation theory by Berry. This sees the overall attitudes towards a second culture as coming from the interaction between two distinct questions. One, is it considered to be of value to maintain cultural identity and characteristics? Do our students merge with the rest of the population, or do they maintain their separate cultural identities? Or do they stay within their local community and maintain their cultural differences? Second question, is it considered to be of value to maintain relationships with other groups? Some students keep to themselves, others mix freely. Greek students in England, for example, usually seem to mix with other Greeks. Japanese students in England, on the other hand, seem to mix much more with other people, and it's surprising that two Japanese students in the same university class do not know each other. There are then four possible patterns of acculturation. First, integration, which is a multilingual state where the languages exist alongside each other in harmony. And integration occurs when individuals are able to adopt the cultural norms of the dominant or host culture while maintaining their culture of origin. Second, assimilation. Assimilation results in the eventual dying out of the first language, the so-called melting pot model once used in the United States. And it occurs when individuals adopt the cultural norms of a dominant or host culture over their original culture. Third, separation. Separation results in friction-prone situations where the languages are spoken in physically separate regions. It occurs when individuals reject the dominant or host culture in favor of preserving their culture of origin. And fourth, marginalization. This is the least rewarding version, which occurs when individuals reject both their culture of origin and the dominant host culture. A crucial aspect of attitudes is what the students think about people who are second language users or monolinguals. Groups have fairly positive attitudes towards speaking two languages. Children feel less comfortable in a second language than the others. They feel more threatened by the new language. One crucial point coming out of this is how teaching reinforces unfavorable images of second language users. Students never see successful second language users in action and so have no role model to emulate other than the native speaker, which they will very rarely match. We have learned that the goals of language teaching include changing people's attitudes towards other cultures and using second language effectively. And these are hardly advanced by showing students either students like themselves or people who are unable to use more than one language. Are some people better at learning a second language than others? Everybody knows people who have a knack for learning second languages and others who are rather poor at it. Some immigrants who have been in the country for 20 years are very fluent. Others from the same background and living in the same circumstances for the same amount of time speak the language rather poorly. Given that their ages, motivations, and so on are the same, why are there such differences? Some people have more aptitude for learning second languages than others. Aptitude has almost invariably been applied to students in classrooms. It does not refer to the knack that some people have for learning in real-life situations, but to the ability to learn from teaching. Let's take, for instance, the Modern Languages Aptitude Test, which incorporates four main factors that predict a student's success in the classroom. These are phonemic coding ability, which indicates how well the student can use phonetic script to distinguish phonemes, the distinctive sounds of a language. Second, grammatical sensitivity, which refers to whether the student can pick out grammatical functions in a sentence. Third, inductive language learning ability, which refers to whether the student can generalize patterns from one sentence to another. And finally, rote learning, which means whether the student can remember vocabulary list of foreign words paired with translations. Krashen suggests aptitude is important for formal situations such as classrooms, and attitude is important for informal real-world situations. While aptitude tests are indeed more or less purpose-designed for classroom learners, this still leaves open the existence of a general knack for learning languages in street settings. The problem for language teachers is what to do once the students have been tested for academic language learning aptitude. We look at these possibilities. First, select students who are likely to succeed in the classroom and bar those who are likely to fail. This would, however, be unthinkable in most settings with open access to education. 2. Stream students into different classes for levels of aptitude, say high flyers, average, and below average. 3. Provide different teaching for different types of aptitude with different teaching methods and final examinations. This might lead to varied exercises within the class, say for those with and without phonemic coding ability, to parallel classes or to self-directed learning. And 4. Excuse students with low aptitude from compulsory foreign language requirements. The overall lesson is to see students in particular context. The student whose performance is dismal in one class may be gifted in another. Any class teaching is a compromise to suit the greatest number of students. Only in individualized or self-directed learning, perhaps, can this be overcome. Now, are young second language learners better than old learners? Undoubtedly, children are popularly believed to be better at learning second languages than adults. People always know one friend or acquaintance who started learning English as an adult and never managed to learn it properly, and another who learned it as a child and is indistinguishable from a native. This belief in the superiority of young learners was enshrined in the critical period hypothesis, or CPH, which claims that human beings are only capable of learning their first language between the age of 2 years and the early teens. A variety of explanations have been put forward for the apparent decline in adults. 1. Physical factors such as the loss of plasticity in the brain and lateralization of the brain. 2. Social factors such as the different situations and the relationships that children encounter compared to adults. And 3. Cognitive explanations such as the interference with natural language learning by the adults' more abstract mode of thinking. The obvious conclusion is that teachers should take advantage of this ease of learning by teaching a second language as early as possible. Usually, children are thought to be better at pronunciation in particular. The claim is that an authentic accent cannot be acquired if the second language is learned after a particular age, say the early teens. Adults start more quickly and then slow down. Though children start more slowly, they finish up at a higher level. A current view in classroom acquisition supports the claim that older learners learn faster than younger ones. Younger learners have an advantage only when they have more language exposure. Any comparison of younger and older learners would also involve them having the same amounts of second language exposure, almost impossible to achieve. Nor is age an adequate explanation in itself if we cannot explain which aspect of maturation causes the difference, whether physical, social, cognitive, or linguistic. How should a language teacher take the student's age into account? One question is, when should second language teaching start? This also involves how long the learners are going to be studying. If they are intending to spend many years learning the second language, they might as well start as children rather than as adults, since they will probably end up better speakers. If they're going to learn the second language for a few years and then drop it, like the majority of learners perhaps, there is an advantage for adults who would reach a higher standard during the same period. A related question is whether the use of teaching methods should vary according to the age of the students. At particular ages, students prefer particular methods. Teenagers may dislike any technique that exposes them in public. Role play and simulation are in conflict with their adolescent anxieties. Adults can feel they are not learning properly in play-like situations and prefer a conventional formal style of teaching. Adults learn better than children from the childish activities of total physical response. Age is by no means crucial to second language learning itself. Spolsky describes 3 conditions for second language learning related to age. 1. Formal classroom learning requires skills of abstraction and analysis. That is to say, if the teaching method entails sophisticated understanding and reasoning by the student, as for instance a traditional grammar translation method, then it's better for the student to be older. 2. The child is more open to second language learning in informal situations. Hence, children are easier to teach through an informal approach. 3. The natural second language situation may favor children. The teaching of adults requires the creation of language situation in the classroom that in some ways compensate for this lack. An important characteristic of language spoken to small children is that it is concerned with the here and now rather than with the absent objects or the abstract topics that are talked about in adult conversation. That is to say, ordinary speech spoken by adults to adults is too sophisticated for second language learning. Restricting the language spoken to the beginning second language learner to make it reflect the here and now could be of benefit. This is reminiscent of the audiovisual and situational teaching methods, which stress the provision of concrete visual information through physical objects or pictures in the early stages of second language learning. But it may go against the idea that the content of teaching should be relevant and should not be trivial. Most adaptation to the age of the learner in textbooks concerns the presentation of material and topics, and these are age appropriate. But as always with published materials, they have to aim at an average student. Our takeaways at this point are as follows. To be older leads to better learning in the short term, other things being equal. Some research still favors child superiority at pronunciation, but not reliably. And children get a higher level of proficiency in the long term than those who start second language learning while older, perhaps because adults slow down. Finally, are other personality traits such as cognitive style, personality differences, and other individual variations which include intelligence, sex differences, level of first language, social class, and empathy important to second language learning? Are other personality traits important to second language learning? First, Let's look at cognitive style. And cognitive style refers to a technical psychological distinction between typical ways of thinking. When students' thinking relates to their surroundings, their cognitive style is called field dependent. However, if they think independently of their surroundings, their cognitive style is called field independent. A difference in cognitive style might well make a difference to success in second language learning. Most researchers have found that the tendency towards field independence helps the student with conventional classroom learning. This seems in a sense obvious in that formal education in the West successively pushes students up the rungs of a ladder of abstraction away from the concrete. Cognitive style varies to some extent from one culture to another, and there are variations between learners on different islands in the Pacific and between different sexes, though field independence tends to go with good scores in a closed test. Now, let's look at personality differences. Perhaps an outgoing, sociable person learns a second language better than a reserved, shy person. One researcher found a link between extroversion and oral fluency. Another found that more complex tasks were easier for extrovert learners. The introverts might be expected to prefer academic teaching that emphasizes individual learning and language knowledge. The extroverts, on the other hand, audiolingual or communicative teaching that emphasizes group participation and social know-how. Many other variations in the individual's mental makeup have been checked against second language success. Like intelligence, for example, has some connection with school performance, and there are links between intelligence and attitude in classrooms as might be expected. Also, sex differences have been investigated. It's true in every country that second languages are more popular school subjects among girls. About 70% of undergraduates studying modern languages in the UK are women. Greek women students were better than men at syntax and semantics. We also look at level of first language, which is also relevant. Some studies support the common teacher's view that children who are more advanced in their first language are better at their second language. We also look at social class. Upper middle class students have more favorable motivational characteristics, particularly students' belief that they are going to be successful. And finally, we look at empathy. Those students who are able to empathize with the feelings of others are better at learning second language pronunciation, though this depends to some extent on the language the students are acquiring. In a nutshell, in dealing with individual differences in language teaching, as teachers, we need to recognize the variety and nature of motivations of our language learners. We should also work with, not against, our student motivation in materials and content. We have learned that important attitudes in second language learners include maintaining cultural identity, maintaining relationships with other groups, beliefs about bilingualism, and beliefs about monolingualism. We too need to acknowledge that students without aptitude can be excluded if allowable on other grounds. We can provide different teaching for learners with different types of aptitude, even streaming into fast and slow streams. And age issues affect when and how to teach the second language. Many of the factors discussed in this video cannot be affected by teachers. Age cannot be changed, nor can gender, intelligence, and most areas of personality. Since we teachers cannot change them, we have to live with them. In other words, we need to recognize the differences between our students. At a gross level, this means catering for the factors that our class have in common, say age and type of motivation of our students. At a finer level, this means catering for the differences between students in our class by providing opportunities for each of them to benefit in their own way. Like the same teaching can be taken in different ways by different students. And to some teachers, this is not sufficient. Nothing will do but complete individualization so that each student has his or her own unique course. And for class teaching, the aspects in which students are different have to be balanced against those that they share. Much second language learning is common ground, whatever the individual differences between learners may be. This is Ron Ortiz. Thank you for watching.